So we are getting into Hebrews, and we're actually going to cover one sentence today. It's not going to always go this slow, but the first 4 verses of Hebrews are actually one sentence in the Greek. It's the intro. So we are going to get into that today. Like I said, it won't always be just such a short thing to cover, but just as this is a separate section and there's some other stuff to touch on, I think it's a good place to start. Just the beginning of Hebrews, chapter 1 through 4, is what we're generally going to cover today. So, just a reminder that a couple of little tips. We covered this a little last time I talked. That this is really more of a sermon than a letter. There isn't a welcome greetings from Paul kind of thing in the beginning. They just kind of get right into the message. This possibly a sermon, possibly written as a letter. Either way, probably wasn't Paul, but we know that the church accepted it because the people around there knew who the people were, and everyone accepted this as the Word of God. So we know that it belongs here, and the context is. Believers, they knew the Old Testament. They may or may not have been Jews, or they may have been mixed. But they clearly understand the Old Testament and are familiar with it because it's quoted all the way through, all the time. I think there's something like 39 direct quotes and 39 allusions or something like that. So it's two people that knew their Bible. And a reminder that their Bible at the time would have been the Septuagint, and Septuagint was in the 3rd century BC. Because Alexander had conquered the world and Greek kind of took over as the common language, a group translated the Old Testament into Greek so that people could read it at the time. So when Jesus and Paul and all these people that wrote what we have written down, they would have, majority of the time, actually been quoting the Greek version. So then a lot of our Bibles are translated from, it's called the Masoretic text, which was a bunch of Jews kept making copies of the Hebrew Old Testament until the 7th to 10th century AD, after Jesus. And then that version is what a lot of, the King James was translated from that, Latin and then that. So that stayed in Hebrew all the way through. There are slight variations and focuses on some of the way those things were translated. So when people who know these original languages better read these quotes, they can tell whether they're from the Septuagint or the Masoretic. So there's going to be times, not today so much, but I think there's a couple verses we'll quote that we'll actually want to look at the difference there. But it's interesting if you ever get into Bible translations, the one you have, whether it was from, because the Greek one is older than the copy, the version of it is older than the Hebrew version, even though the Hebrew version was translated all the way through. There's just some variations there. So I don't know, it's interesting if you ever come across it. I just want to be familiar with the concept too of those things. So there isn't one that's necessarily better than other, but there's the thinking of the time, we believe, is slightly more likely to be communicated clearly through the Greek one, because that's what the apostles and Jesus and Paul were quoting, so that's why it matters. All right, so the idea of this book is God is speaking to his church. He always has been. And it was through Israel at the time, up to Jesus, when Jesus opened it up to the whole world. So God has continually been speaking, but he has fully clarified his vision for the world through Jesus, and Jesus is the focus. And that's what the focus of this book is about. So the whole point of Hebrews is Jesus is great. And there's a lot of comparison he makes, but the focus, We'll spend time in the comparisons to fill out the picture, but we want to keep in mind, as always, Jesus is the focus. It's the kind of book where it isn't like this practical application kind of book. It's more theology. It's more concepts. And a lot of times I think our culture is very pragmatic, and we want a step to take home, 3 steps to take home, and how to live my life, and tell me just what to do. But I think we need to spend more time just looking at Jesus and who he is, and just staring at him, and all the misconceptions and all the junk and all the cultural stuff that gets in the way will pass aside if we're just staring at Jesus. And we get a clearer vision of him. And not we need to know how to live our lives, but we need to live our lives in light of the beauty and the perfect image of God that we see through Jesus, reflected in Jesus. So I think that's why it's worth spending our time here with us today. So I'm going to read. You can put up the slide. Just put the 1 through 4, the text verse. I made sections, and I'm not sure how it shows up with Easy Worship. Yeah. Nope. Do you have to go through all of them? I made it in sections, and I don't know if it would work right or not. Is that the only one that's working? There you go. That one. Back one. There. That's our text for today. There we go. I messed with the PowerPoint slide in a way, and I didn't tell them. So let's read. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to the angels as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. So again, this is just one sentence, one big run-on sentence. Your grammar people would not be happy with it nowadays, but if you could read the Greek and truly understand it, this is like a beautiful literary work. The way this is all woven together, and there's alliteration and there's parallelism. There's all sorts of beautiful language in here that it weaves the concepts of the book. He weaves the concepts that he's about to address in the entirety of the book through this one little sentence. And he basically lays out and gives foreshadowing of everything he's going to talk about in this sentence, or she potentially. But it's very dense, but the big is we're contrasting. I said God is speaking. He spoke in the past, but now we have a perfectly clear vision of who he is in Jesus. Now, so in verse 1 and the first half of 2, long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets, but in these last days, he's spoken to us by his Son. Christ is God's final word. He fulfills, surpasses all the previous revelation. There's this quote that I came across that I thought was interesting. When the church ceases to lift Christ to the height where all people can see him, it becomes useless and a fraud. Our entire goal is to lift Jesus and to show the world how great and wonderful he is, and where that is the focus of our faith. Our faith is not in what we can get and what we can do. Our faith is in Jesus, and all the rest kind of flows out of that. So again, we shoot for the stars. Jesus is the bright and shining star. He's the target. He's the goal, and everything else in our lives flow from him. So there's 4 kind of little breakdowns of this stretch. We're comparing 2 things. So you have long time ago in the past way, and now in these days. So there's a lot of contrast, like parallelism here is the word they would use, is contrasting two things. So there's 4 of these in this stretch. So I'm going to clarify. So the first one I'm going to compare is the time. So there's long ago and in these last days. So long ago, obviously, it was before Jesus, and it's what we know. It was the buildup of this information that God had shared with his people over this period, over the time, ever since Adam in the beginning, and all the stories, everything was God telling this story of Jesus leading up to it, but there was no way to understand it until you could see it all clarified in Jesus. He's like the magnifying glass that brings all these beams of light together in focus. And that transitions when Jesus came to what the term is last days. And when you see last days, it's kind of like a specific term. It's not just a time period. It speaks of God's judgment, God's what's the word? His salvation, the focal point of Jesus coming back. It's not just the time period, it's all that's tied up into what the apocalypse, everything that's, the culmination. It's all of his actions and everything that's going to happen and all the events tied together. It's not just, today. It's the narrowing, continually drawing closer to all these events that we read about, and the culmination from the time when we fell and God had already made the plan of Jesus that's continuing on. His coming to earth was the trigger point to change it, but we are still building to a point of his return. And all that time from when he came till the time he comes back is the last days, I guess. And this, again, it's still centered on Jesus. And there's a lot of things that's going to happen in these times, and these people that he has written to are experiencing a lot of the trauma that was going on at the time. We don't know exactly what's going on, but there's definitely persecution. There's definitely stress and pressure, and those people were feeling it, and they were being tempted to turn from him, from focus on Jesus, and potentially back to the temple and the old law, the way of doing, the sacrificial way of doing things, as a way to ease the pressure of life. And there's going to be pressure in these times. I don't know exactly what the prophecies, how they play out. Like I said, there's stuff going on in the world, but there's always stuff going on in the world. We don't know how it's going to play out, but there is promise that we are going to feel pressure as we serve him. Like, just the fact of serving him, the world is opposed to that. There are spirits that are fighting us as his people in this time, and we need to persevere, but that perseverance doesn't come from just, there's a value in just putting one foot in front of the other. And we are called to do that as a baseline, but if you read about the early church and the way some of those guys were martyred, they were like happy to do it. There was joy because they knew Jesus, because they saw who he was. And that's what gets us through. It's this eternal focus on Jesus. Learn more about Jesus. Learn more about who he is, because he is God. He is the picture of who God is. He is God's love incarnate. And that is where our focus has to be. If it's not, we're selling ourselves short. And that's where the joy and that's where the gifts and the benefits of being in his kingdom, but it's where the passion comes from. It's where the zeal, where the joy, it's all in Jesus, and that's where our focus has to be. So the how in this stretch, the contrast there is in many times and ways versus the one way, his son. So early on, God's message has not changed, but his message was hidden, I think he says. That there's pieces that came through the prophets, through the word, the Torah. And these prophets were just people that God spoke to. They were willing to take on whatever life brought to be his messenger, for the most part. Some of them struggled with that idea and ran away for a little bit, but came and ultimately fell through. But a prophet from the Old Testament is just one who communicated God's message to the world. And it's interesting to get into that. We'll keep moving though. It's interesting who God considers a prophet if you look back. Like Abel is listed as the first prophet, but we don't know why. But anyone that had God's heart and carried God's message and spoke his truth was considered a prophet. And these are the people, these are where we got this message through. But that message, again, that message was scattered. It had to be pieced together. It had to be brought into focus. It's very easy for us to look back. Well, it's much easier for us to look at Jesus now and look back and find these things like, oh, that's Jesus. Oh, that's Jesus, reading the Old Testament. But at the time, even the Spirit, Satan didn't know what he was doing. And he's probably a fairly smart being, and he had all this information, but very few people could put it together except for the ones that God had graced with that. Like David had a vision. How clear that vision was of actually what it meant, but he had, if you read the Psalms, if you read some of these prophecies, people got glimpses, but no one had the picture until Jesus came. So, God has always been speaking. He will continue to always be speaking to us, but that vision has to be in light of Jesus. And really, I don't know if he's speaking anything new other than just explaining more and more who Jesus is, because we're never going to fully grasp the depth of what he did and who he is. Yeah. So let's move on to who. So the contrast here, I got to be able to look at this. I did not structure my notes to be able to look back well. Long ago, in many times, many ways, he spoke to our fathers by the prophets, and in the last days he's spoken to us. So the contrast here is between our fathers and to us. And the interesting thing is, this is not casting the past aside. He's not saying, throw all the rest away and just look at Jesus, because the rest isn't worthless anymore, because he says, our fathers. Like that in there inherently is a tying us to that line. And we are part of that line. All the truth has never changed. Again, the truth just becomes more clear as we go along and we understand it in light of Jesus. But now that we have seen Jesus, us now who know the story bear greater responsibility. If you look at chapter 2, 1 through 4, I'll read this at the NET here. Therefore, we must pay closer attention to what we have heard so that we do not drift away. For the message spoken through the angels proved to be so firm that every violation or disobedience received its just penalty. How will we escape it if we neglect such a great salvation? It was first communicated through the Lord and was confirmed to us by those who heard him. We will be held responsible for the fact that we know now. We know the truth. We should be set free by the truth and live our lives in that line. So there is great value in it, but again, it requires us to grow into it. So the fourth one is the who. God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. No, I got into the prophets already. And now he's spoken to us through his Son. The Son here, a lot of them you will see it capitalized. Does your version, as you're looking at it, have it capitalized? Some of them do, some of them don't. The actual translation should be more like a son. It's not a title. And then I'm going to get a little sidetrack into something that's always I like getting into, so I'll try to keep it brief. But there's a lot of people who struggle with the idea that it's always hard to phrase things correctly, but we know that there's one God, but there are more than one God. There is one true and only and all-powerful creative God, but he created other beings, other people in his image. And the word that used in the Old Testament is Elohim, and that the word is for God. That word is also used for other gods. If you read, like Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created heaven and earth, that's Elohim. But that means God, the one and only true God. But that same word in Exodus 12:12 says, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt. That night I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. On all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord." That word is the same word used for God, so it's tricky for people because there's some people who are just afraid to acknowledge that there's any other spirit beings. I think I talked about some last time. Since the Enlightenment, several centuries ago, there's more and more focus in our society on science and knowledge and that type of thing. And so our focus, we've inherited that mindset in a lot of ways. So a term for that would be materialism. And that's just prevalent in this world in that people think the only thing that matters is what you can observe, what you can feel, what you can prove by science. And science is inherently the study of nature, and so anything supernatural would not be defined by science anyway. So there's a whole other thing there. But so people approaching the Word and truly love God, but they struggle with the concept of there being other spirit, the spirit world, that kind of thing. So that's where God, the sons of God language, and there being other gods gets difficult for people to handle and process, because we tend to be pretty open with the concept of spirits in the spirit world and powers and principalities and all that, but not everyone in Christianity kind of has that same mindset. So you're going to be talking to people about this. So the goal here is to equip to study this stuff out and explore it and we all think through it so we can explain these things as we explain Jesus and our lives to him, or to the people around us. Elohim can also be translated angels or heavenly beings. Psalm 89, 5-7 says, "Let the heaven praise your wonders, O Lord, your faithfulness in the assembly of the holy ones. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings," that's the Elohim there, "is like the Lord, a God greatly to be feared in the council of holy ones, awesome above all those who are around him." Again, so there are heavenly beings. There's this concept of divine council where God has this throne room, and there are He wants to, just as he wants us to be part of bringing his kingdom to this earth, he has other created beings, the spirits, like the angels and all these other ones, he wants to participate in his kingdom as well. So there's a spirit world with his imagers, people or beings he created, that this terminology for gods gets thrown around for. And some of them have fallen. Some of them have turned away from him, just like some of us have. And these are some of our evil. These are opposing forces. Our battle is not against flesh and blood and powers and principalities. These are spirits he has created, other beings that we are that are resisting the advance of God's kingdom. And we have to be more aware of that stuff. I think even in our stream of Christianity, where we believe in the power and the Spirit, I think we get caught up again. We're in this material world. We think about the things. We think about not having enough money, or we think about people or relational struggles or things like that. And we have to be more aware, I think, that there are spiritual forces at work all the time in the world, underneath all the things that are going on. This stuff in the Middle East, there are spiritual forces at work in this. So, when Jesus is referred to as a son, that's where that language can trip people up, because there are many sons of God, spiritual sons of God. And Jesus is a son of God in the respect that he's a spirit. And there are others. But the idea isn't that he's just another one. The idea is he is so different. He is so far above the rest that it's as far as God was. We'll get to that in a second. There is no comparison between him and the other spirits, because he is God. He is elevated. He's almighty. This son has a unique relationship with God, unlike any other. John 1:18, the New American Standard phrases it a little better, a little clearer than I'm using ESV just as a general base translation. A lot of people respect it, but there's times here and there where it's not necessarily the clearest. Every translation is inherently, potentially, there's going to be a little flaw here and there. Potentially, that's why you need to be willing to compare these things. There's no one translation, because you're inherently working with languages that don't have the same words in them. So you have to, different languages have a word that there isn't a direct translation word to word a lot of times, or there's multiple words. So there's always going to be some flexibility in how people interpret that. So be willing to explore different translations, not just to find the one you want to hear, but with study, and reading people, you can get consensus and understand why things were phrased one way or the other. And that'll help you when there's a difference between the two. You can look into it, and a lot of times you can find the explanation as to why one made the one choice of words versus a different choice of word. Anyway, another side trail here. But New American Standard, John 1:18, no one has seen God at any time, God the only Son, who was in the arms of the Father, he has explained him. This, I want to clarify, because this language, the way Hebrews is written, you can, if you just, on the surface without looking into it, you can read this as Jesus is another one of the created beings. There was God, then he made this son, and this son is where he fulfilled his promise, but he's not God. And so we want to clarify the special relationship, the uniqueness of Jesus as God's son, and what that means. Because we're all children of God. There's a difference, though. So no one has seen God at any time. God, the only Son, who's in the arms of the Father, he has explained him. This is a unique relationship. There is only one Son currently in the arms of the Father. They are one. And he is the ultimate representation of God. And we'll keep moving. So, and the message we receive from him is not just what he taught, but how he lived his life as well. And yeah, that's right. And there's a lot to be gleaned from all that he did, and understanding all that surrounds him and his position in light of all that. So let's move on to the second half of 2. We're going to do the rest of this section. Whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He's the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. He upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of Majesty on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. So you see verse 3, this validates why the Son is worthy. This is the listing of what he's done. We'll get into that, I guess, a little bit. So there's basically like 7 affirmations, 7 things he did, or values of him, of the Son. So the first one is, whom he appointed the heir of all things. And this is our first, it's not a direct quote from the Old Testament, but it's what's the word? It's a reference to it, but it's not a direct quote. And this is from Psalm 2, verse 7 and 8, says, I will tell the decree, the Lord said to me, you are my son, today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. So this is reiterating that Jesus has received everything from the God. There's nothing God is holding back from him. And when we get to next week, next time, we'll get into verse 5, which actually quotes verse 7 here. And the connotation is he has, like I said, he has everything, all of creation. There is nothing held back from him, from his authority, from his power, and from his salvation. There's nothing been restricted, nothing he could not overcome by his death and burial and resurrection. Next, through whom also he created the world. So this is the eye on the Son as the author of creation. And so this fills out the tie. There's 2 parts. There's Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, who is in the very beginning and the creative force of God, and then there's the not ascended. There's the incarnate Jesus who came to the earth as form of a man and then died and ascended. And so there's both of these tied up in the same character. So it's hard sometimes to take just a surface reading and fully understand everything that's being discussed here. But and he'll get on later on verse 10, he'll say, Lord, you laid the foundation of the earth in the beginning. The heavens are the work of your hands. So the Hebrews author also acknowledges this is the God of creation. So just to fill out this picture, Colossians 1:15-16 references Jesus as creator and says, for he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And I don't want to get further down the line. I got a lot of notes that I got to get through. There's a tie. Well, I guess we'll get into that a little bit. So Jesus is not just this Son, the guy that came to earth and was created to die for our sins. No, this is the eternal God who was there from the beginning of the earth, and all creation was worked. He was the agent of creation. So I want to reiterate, there's a danger, and I feel it in my own self. I struggle with it off and on. This idea of familiarity, and we use that term. It's like a churchy term, the way to do it. But we have this word from God, but many of us have been hearing this for years and years and years. And Christianity is not a relationship. It's not a religion of feelings. That's not the point. You don't need to feel everything like in some warm way. But if there isn't any, if we're going through the motion, if we don't feel this alive to us, if it's not energizing us, this message, if it's not driving our actions and changing the way we live our lives, then we need to self-reflect and be like, if this really means something to me, if I really believe it to mean what it's saying, then my life will look different. My life will continually be growing more and more into the image of him. And we're going through this, and it's a lot of stuff we've heard before, I think, a lot of us. And I'm the one teaching it, and sometimes I'm like, I really wish that meant more to me as I'm reading this, like some of these things. And some of them are great. Some of you get that spark, and it feels alive to you. But again, just invite the Spirit to make this alive. At least one thing to just catch and inspire us as we're going through this. This is the word. I mean, we can say this is the word of Almighty God, the guy who created the universe. He holds everything in the palm of his hand, and he sent Jesus as his own. He came to earth and submitted himself. Like, we can say that stuff, but if it's not changing us, if we're not letting it change us, and we're not feeling, applying, if it's not working in us to accomplish something, then we need to step back and be like, hold on, what am I missing here? God, what do I need? What's holding me back? What's blocking this from connecting? I don't know, it's just, and I realize that I'm saying that to myself as much as anyone else in this room. This is everything. Jesus is everything. And we forget that. We live our lives, we go step by step. There's the next thing, there's the next problem. We're waiting for the other shoe to drop. There's someone struggling in our life. We're struggling in our life. Money, all these things. But Jesus is the only thing. Everything, and it's not just I'm going to go off and ignore everything else. It's Jesus is the filter. Jesus is the center, the focal point, and all the rest flows from that. And this is Jesus we're talking about. And I don't need you to start yelling for or anything, but just within yourself, remember this is God came to earth for us, and it has to affect us. If it's not affecting us, we're missing. There's something not there. So anyway, I don't know. So he is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. So there's some interesting words in here. The word radiance is apogasma, I think, in Greek. This is the only time this word is used in the New Testament. And this word caught me. This was like the radiance, like God is the sun and Jesus is the light beams. Like there's the sun, this light, look at this light, it's bright, but you can't separate the rays of light from the brightness of the light. Like they're so intertwined, they're inseparable, but they are kind of separate. It's a beautiful kind of image of Jesus' splendor and brightness. And it means Jesus is the manifestation of God's presence and glory. John 1:14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We have seen his glory as the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Jesus is the radiance. Jesus is the brightness of God shining on us. And this is the revelation of his nature. This is who God is coming through Jesus this way. But this word only shows up in one other place in the book called The Wisdom of Solomon. And the Wisdom of Solomon is one of the apocryphal books. So like the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church, their Bibles have these books in the middle. They call them pseudepigrapha or apocrypha, depending on which one. And they're generally not considered quite as authoritative, like quite as the Bible in their world. But for us, they are books that were written along that same time, and they tell us about the mindset of the people towards God. And then there's information in there that's valuable to help us to we get a lot of this background stuff and a lot of their mindset. And the Bible, there are people in the Bible that quote. 1 Peter quotes Enoch and some other things. So there's value in there. But the only other time we know this word exists anywhere is in the Wisdom of Solomon. And it's interesting because I don't have time to get into it too much, but it is talking about Lady Wisdom, like the embodiment of wisdom, but it's given a female form, or a female, whatever definition. And so she is a reflection of eternal light, spotless mirror of the working God. So that's the only other time this word is used, is Jesus here in Hebrews and for Lady Wisdom in the book of the Wisdom of Solomon. And I thought this was really cool. And so it's just another way. Proverbs 8 is all about Lady Wisdom, too, so you can read about that. But, so in Proverbs 8, 27 to 31, it says, "When he established the heavens, I was there." This is Lady Wisdom talking. "When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limits so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him. Like a master workman, I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in the inhabited world and delighting in the children of man." So they are both eternal and the agents of creation. So they are, it's symbolic language, but this is Jesus tied again. So Jesus is not just a created, this is a heresy that showed up in the church, and you have to watch out. And the way you read it, you could read it as God created Jesus to do this thing. And that Jesus is God. He was there from creation. Everything was created through him. If he was created, then everything, you can't create something if you're, like, you can't be created if everything is created and you're the one doing it. Like, logically, it doesn't work. You have to be there before if you're going to create everything. So you may come across someone who's going to point this out, and it's going to look weird. So we want to have a way to refute these things and understand the truth here. So it's not, the writer of Hebrews is not saying Jesus was created. He understands all this. He just uses different language to kind of communicate. The picture of sonship is used to give us a fuller picture of the thing, not to say he was created as a separate being. And so we get into later the word imprint or representation in a little bit, depending on your translation. And that word is character, but it's spelled with a K. It's the Greek word. This is also the only time it shows up in the New Testament, this word. And it was originally meant like an engraving tool or the image that the engraving tool created. So the writer of Hebrews uses this word to make it mean what he wants to. He's like playing with words. But the idea here is it's like stamping a coin. Like Jesus is that imprint. Like if you picture the face of Lincoln or something on a dime, Jesus is the imprint of God. Like that, he's a representation. But he represents the whole being of God. It's not just like a picture on the wall, like a painting. Philippians says, though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. And Colossians 1:15, he's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. It's not just, he's not an idol of God, but he is a representation, not a facsimile, that's the wrong word. He's the picture of the being of God. You look at Jesus and you see the ultimate being of God in his image. That's when you look at him. It's again, the whole Trinity thing's kind of a complicated thing. No one can fully explain it, but it's his nature, and we need to understand it better. And then the word nature is hypostasis, the exact imprint of his nature, and that is his essence, his actual being, his reality. He's not a created inheritor, but he's a co-equal, co-eternal Yahweh, the Almighty God. He upholds the universe, the next phrase, he upholds the universe by the word of his power, which means he manages the created order. It's not his power, he He is guiding all creation into the ultimate fulfillment. Like we talked, this is the last days. He is guiding this. He's driving the bus to get us to the ultimate where he returns and all is fulfilled, and the new heavens and the new earth, and we come back to live a new eternal life with him. And that is, he's the one sustaining that. He's driving that. And it's all through his word. And the word universe there just means all things. It's not like a scientific universe kind of term. It just means everything. After making purification for sins, the next line, he made that purification by sacrificing himself. And this calls back to a lot of the sacrificial system, the Day of Atonement and that, and we'll get more into that as we get farther down into the book. The next phrase is, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. If you look at this grammatically, this is the focal point of the whole line. Is he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. It's an allusion to Psalm 110:1, which is, the Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. I've heard that before. And it's just a picture of his superior power, his ultimate honor, his greatness, his favor. The word majesty was actually used a lot of times, I'm not sure how to exactly pronounce it, but periphrasis, which is basically they didn't like to say the name of God. Like the Hebrew, I think a lot of you have heard that. The Hebrews did not like to say Yahweh. So they would use other phrases in substitute, so pronouns, so they weren't actually saying the word. And the word majesty was one of those words that's used at this time when this was written. So that's why it's here, it means God. And this is an exceptional position. Like, there is no one else that can be at the right hand of God. There is no other than Jesus. He is the ultimate. And verse 4, is the last phrase here. Having become much superior to angels, as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. Superior, the word is Crichton, but this is the author of Hebrews. His favorite word when he's describing the preeminence of Christ. This word is throughout the book, talking about Jesus being above all, the ultimate. And it says, well, this word is going to show up, and having become superior was not a position. It's not a positional thing. It's not like he was lower, like in rank, and then God moved him up. He promoted him a few times, and now he's better than angels. It's just talking about him submitting himself to becoming human, and to be humbled and less than us, and then be exalted again after his ascension. And so that word means the name, status. The word anoma. The word is anoma for name, and that name. The word name can mean name, your status, your title, your rank, your representation, or person. But this is also another one of those periphrasis words, like majesty. This is another word that would be used instead of the word for God. So again, two phrases in a row, he's equating Jesus with God by using that terminology that was known at the time as representing God. And so this is this is his title he's inherited, but the phrasing where it says having become could also have been having been, depending on how you translate that grammar. So it's not necessarily that he went from one thing to another. It's just he already was. He always was. Having been much superior to the angels, as the name he's inherited is more excellent than theirs. So again, the inherited word too, I think we all know this, but this didn't mean God was going to die and then Jesus was going to come and take over. God is also eternal. He's going to continue on. They are going to be co-rulers. And as Ephesians 1:21 says, far above all rule and authority and power and dominion, above every name that is named, only in this age, but also in the one to come. There is no end to Jesus, his reign, his rule. And I think that's someone we want to hitch our wagon to, so to speak. We get just a glimpse of what, like Jesus is the picture of God, but I think we're only capable of processing just a glimpse of what that really means. And the more time we can spend just meditating on and spending time with, again, and opening ourselves up to the Spirit and just let him explore our heart, but doing it in light of the Word and there's this unique power in the words of Scripture to change us, to show us what's going on inside us and what it means to be in his image, because that's what we're created to be. I heard someone say not that long ago, Christians are the only being in the universe that's trying to be what they are. Animals are just, a dog's a dog. Doesn't have to think about it, doesn't have to try. A sinner is a sinner, so to speak. They're just going to do what they're going to do. Like someone that doesn't know Jesus, they're going to live their life that way without even trying. But until we fully grasp who we are, we've got to work at it. We've got to cast our flesh down. We've got to work through these things. And it doesn't have to be hard. Like Jesus says, his yoke is easy, his burden's light. And it's not beating ourselves up. And it's not focusing on ourselves. It's focusing on him and being willing to change. The biggest thing is just seeing yourself as he sees you, and then letting those things go that are holding you back. And then taking this, that's the effort. And then when we get that, the actions flow. We can be loving. We don't have to try to be loving. We don't have to try to be generous. We don't have to feel awkward putting ourselves out there and telling people about Jesus or ministering the gifts that he's given us towards people that we come in contact with. But it's seeing Jesus as he is and knowing that we are heirs with him. We're his brother and sister. We are God's children, and we are made to be like him. We are made to be like Jesus. Ultimately, that is our ultimate goal, is to be like Jesus. And it's going to be a lifetime process on earth until either he comes back or we pass on and we get revealed what we're going to be. But we are selling ourselves short if we're not making that effort day in and day out. And it's not work, it's a joy when you truly let him change us. So, and then walk it out. So let's worship this Jesus and just let him speak to us. Let him into your heart. let him into all the places that you've been scared to let him into up to this point. Let him change you today.